A few days later, a big explosion thundered in the forest again. We are shown the power of Yitong, which easily destroyed all the monsters in the area. Then she landed on the ground and Qin appeared, who praised her for her excellent work. During the invasion of the second batch of werewolves, she was much less confident, and she already hacked the fourth batch as an experienced warrior. She asked Qin where he got this technique from and assumed that he brought it from the desert lands. The protagonist replied that it was not so important. If she mastered it to the full, then in the temple of the heart of the Buddha she would do anyone. The girl thought that he had a low opinion of their temple, but she was grateful to him anyway and did not know how to thank him. Then she put her finger on his lips and asked if she could give him herself. The protagonist replied that it was better not to and was embarrassed. She thought he was very cute when he was embarrassed. She asked if they could become named brother and sister and called him brother, and Qin just laughed. Then she sat down opposite Qin on a rock and asked how much time was left before the arrival of the enemy's main army. He thought about it, because before they bring the whole army, there will be 7 false attacks. But after that, the real invasion will begin. According to his estimates, this will happen within a couple of weeks. He thought it was strange, because they had already beaten off 4 batches of werewolves, and he never got on the trail of the Red Scorpion. Considering that he possesses the sacred fire of the 9th rank and stood up for the protection of the temple of the heart of the Buddha, he could not help but attract the attention of the military advisor. He even considered that he had lost his former charm and became invisible to others. Zhang immediately jumped to them and reported that trouble had happened, and Qin was surprised. One of the garrisons 30 kilometers away was attacked by an elite squad of werewolves. All of them were at the 7th stage of the spiritual realm. There are students of the School of the Steel Fist and the Temple of the Great Swordsman, about 50 people in total. Almost all were killed. Qin immediately asked how many werewolves were there. Zhang replied that one of the disciples of the Temple of the Great Swordsman had left some notes before his death and invited Qin to take a look himself. He created a scroll and opened it. There was a white tiger and other werewolves. According to him, a werewolf squad of 16 individuals. After the attack, they split into 2 squads and dispersed. They are the closest to him, so they must immediately catch up with them and destroy them. He couldn't catch up with both squads alone, so he went for one and the 2 of them for the other. Tong asked Zhang Xuan to be calm, because she assured him that they would not let him down. If these are really werewolves at the 7th stage of the spiritual realm and there are only 8 of them, then together they will cope. Qin realized that everything had started, and judging by the description, these werewolves were most likely the personal guards of the military advisor. Then he created a token and said that they would be able to find their werewolf squad using this token, and asked them to take care of themselves. When they defeat the army of werewolves, they will drink together for 3 days and 3 nights, and a very joyful Yitong agreed with him. Immediately he left them and jumped very high. She immediately wanted to move out after the enemies. After that, they were on the battlefield, where everything in the area was burning. Everywhere there was a ruined land and a sea of corpses. Walking on this land, he was very angry and cursed the werewolves, but Qin knew that the invasion of werewolves in a previous life was even more bloody. He wanted to hurry up as soon as possible. They definitely need to catch up with them and finish them off. She gave Qin a token and he used it. She knew that their werewolf squad had gone to those mountains and they needed to follow them. After the duo was in the mountains, Yitong clearly felt the aura of the werewolves. She believed that they were already nearby. But immediately Qin replied with a denial, because they were already surrounded, and the girl was surprised. Immediately, a lot of white werewolves appeared. Worms and beetles also appeared from the ground, and other monsters stood in front of them. The girl realized that these werewolf tigers were not at the 7th stage of the spiritual realm at all, but at the peak. Qin added that there were not 8, but at least 16, and there are about 1,000 small individuals in the rear guard. The girl was angry, because she realized that they were trapped and cursed the werewolves. They could easily cope with 8, but they didn't understand how to deal with so many. She knew that even though Qin was able to kill the Taoist elder who was at the peak of the spiritual realm, but he was alone. She thought that in the face of the current threat, they needed to think about retreating. But this task is not easy either. Qin prepared for battle and she realized that there was no other way out. She also started using her powers. She shouted that she would clear the way for him, and he should spread the word about this situation as soon as possible. Throwing her shurikens, she turned around and said that if she died, then he should definitely avenge her by killing all the werewolves. Immediately she rushed forward, but Qin grabbed her by the hand and replied that it was too early to say goodbye to life. Did she really think that he could not cope with this gang? She knew that Qin was strong, but she didn't think he could handle so many werewolves. The protagonist noticed that she had not yet seen what he was really capable of and asked her to follow closely. The girl stood behind him and Qin summoned his spear. A huge amount of flame appeared around him. Now he will be irresistible, and asked her not to fall in love with him. The demons decided to attack him and rushed forward. Qin stood there and did not even think to move. But immediately he opened his eyes and jumped up and used the third Thunder Spear Ancestor Spirit technique. Immediately, with great speed, Qin hit the ground, which began to be destroyed. The demons were literally destroyed, and a strong shock wave went through the earth. Then a certain sphere was formed, from which even Yitong was hard. After it was over, Qin told her that everything was ready. The girl was surprised that he destroyed everyone in one move. He told her he would be irresistible. The third Thunder Spear already belongs to the heavenly level weapon, and using it together with the heavenly level technique, the effect is simply amazing. The whole scene was watched by a scorpion that stood on a rock above Qin and Yi. She was surprised that they didn't have an elite squad just like that. 16 personal guards of the Tiger General and 1,000 small individuals fell from one blow. Immediately, she raised her tail and shot a needle with poison into it, which hit right in the knee. She was glad she could get in. They didn't expect Qin Yue to be so strong, but at least it was good that the operation was a success in the end. The stronger Qin is, the more benefit he will bring to their race. One day he will turn this spear against his own and will stand astride a mountain of the bodies of the people he killed. He will be their main weapon in the war against humans. After the villain began to climb underground and Qin looked right there, he was glad that everything was ready. The girl asked him what had happened and the protagonist told her that it was time for them to return. The girl felt that there was something strange. After that they were in the garrison. Yitong shouted at Zheng Xuan because he had provided them with erroneous information and therefore they were in danger. Zheng apologized to her and assured her that this would not happen again. He asked if Brother Qin would forgive him. He put his hand on it and replied that of course, because soon they would become like brothers. And when solving big problems without fraternal support anywhere, Zheng was happy and agreed with him. Well, Yi looking at them was surprised and did not understand what was wrong with them. Zheng glared at him and offered to talk in the evening. And Qin also looked at him and replied that of course I agree with him. Already at night, Zhen was standing on a cliff, above a cliff. Immediately, Qin himself appeared, turning around. Zhen told him that they would soon become the right and left hands of the Tiger General. Qin agreed with him, so he counted on mutual support. Zhen noticed that he said it perfectly. Qin asked when he would be able to take him to him. Zhen asked him to take his time, because everything has its time. Soon the Tiger General will organize a massive attack. They will have to fight it off in order to gain respect among people, and when they achieve unquestionable authority here, they will earn an audience with the Tiger General. Qin realized that that tiger did not become a general for nothing. He knows how to wait. Also, he doesn't want to rely on Zheng Xuan alone. He walked up to Qin, hugged him and said that he would now tell him in detail about the general's immediate plans. He started talking to him and Chu Lin appeared out of the water, who was watching them. He realized that Zheng Xuan was now on the side of the werewolves and not only him, but also Qin Yu. He believed that heaven truly favored him. At first, he expected to take control of the Temple of the Buddha's heart with the help of Bai Feifan and his man inside the temple. But now he won't even need them and immediately disappeared into the water. Again they show us the garrison. Yitong was sleeping sweetly in her bed, and Qin was sitting behind the fire and thinking that in order to find the Tiger General, he needed to break through to the second stage of the Destroying Kingdom and summon the Qin Yu Bull. And when he finds the base of the general and his sixers, he will smash everything there into splinters. Then Qin used the force and a certain aura appeared around him. He opened his eyes and used his inner vision. He looked at some crystals and realized that it was time for him to take those 8th grade pills. If you take such pills at once, you can immediately break through to the 3rd stage of the Destroying Kingdom. He had originally planned to strengthen his body before the breakthroughs, but now he didn't have time for that. Immediately, Qin's heart ached and he clutched at himself with his hands. His muscles began to tear and his limbs began to break. He thought it was a side effect of the premature breakthrough. Then the dragon Yazi appeared behind him and his clothes began to burst, but his hands seemed to heal and another purple aura appeared. Immediately, he began to be covered with dragon armor, but only now on his entire body. After a moment, Qin's transformation was complete and even his face changed. He used his inner vision again, and the crystals seemed to pour their energy into him. He easily absorbed all the energy, and then the sphere descended to the ground and immediately Qin appeared, which seemed to destroy the dragon's armor. His body became even bigger and pumped up. The protagonist just exhaled, because he did it all. He is now at the 3rd stage of the Destroying Realm. He realized that it was time for him and immediately called his scroll and asked his friend to come out. He began to summon a certain bull that stood in front of him. He greeted him and began to absorb the bull itself into himself. Immediately, a new mark was formed on Qin's forehead, the mark of a bull. Then Qin opened his eyes and began to scan the whole area very quickly. He literally scanned it. Immediately, Qin discovered the Tiger General and stopped his power. He went up to Yitong and started to wake her up. The girl immediately got up and thought that it was time for the guard. The protagonist turned away so as not to embarrass the girl and replied that he would need to leave for one night. Now she is in charge of the tent. The girl agreed with him. After that, they show us the cave of the Tiger General. He praised Scorpio for his excellent work, because having a natural swordsman and the owner of the sacred fire of the 9th rank at their disposal, their plans are doomed to success. Preparatory measures have been completed, and then only the massacre. The girl congratulated her general, because the victory in this war will be primarily his merit. Tiger told her that if he was promoted to the heavenly general, she would roll like cheese in butter. Then he grinned and put his hand under his face, because being a combat general and a military advisor at the same time, no one will compete with him in promotion. But Kin immediately appeared, who told him that he rejoices early. The general and Scorpio were very surprised and indignant at his appearance. She turned around and asked who he was. The protagonist replied to her that she had seen him just yesterday, and today she can't remember. Scorpio realized that it was still Kin. The tiger felt that he had miscalculated, because the power of the sacred fire of the 9th rank was higher than his expectations. He pretended to be under the influence of the red scorpion, and at the same time he found a way to discover their location. Tiger couldn't help but admit that Kin was much tougher than Zhang Chuan and slowly got up from the throne. A huge tiger general was already standing in front of Kin and asked that since he had come here alone, Kin thought he could handle him alone. Kin was sure of it. The tiger is well aware of its origin. His family gave all their strength for the common good of the human race, but in gratitude for this, people also exterminated it. Therefore, he did not understand why he continued to speak on the side of people. People are very greedy and mean by nature. For the sake of achieving personal goals, they do not disdain any means. Such a race has no future. People only continue to fight with each other, decompose and degrade, and the struggle for a piece of land will be their doomsday. But the monsters are different. They have the unanimity of the upper and lower classes, and one day they will unite all the territories under one authority. And then peace will come to the whole world. He asked Kin to abandon these people and join them. None of the werewolves would discriminate against him because of his background. Once he joins them, he will be a loyal friend and brother of the werewolf race, a member of the family. He wanted Kin to join their ranks for the sake of a common great future. Kin asked if this was his last word. He did not deny that it turned out to be exciting, but he has an irreconcilable enmity with the werewolves and today he will kill a tiger. The general exhaled and added that Kin only strengthened his belief that people are hopeless. Immediately, he went ahead to Kin with the words that he was sorry to lose such an excellent warrior for whom he had big plans, but he would have to kill him. He stomped hard with such force that the ground collapsed, but Kin easily stopped his kick and grabbed his foot. The protagonist finally realized that the tiger was damn strong, and it seemed to him that he was at the peak of the destroying kingdom. Tiger noticed that Kin was a tough guy, but he didn't push such people either. He fired a kind of purple ray at Kin, which flew at supersonic speed, so that Kin already bled from his ears. The protagonist has become quite difficult. Immediately, the tiger caught the moment and hit Kin with his foot at a tremendous speed that he flew forward. Then he immediately added a punch with his hand on the Kin. He literally drove it into the wall. Then the tiger turned around and noticed that Kin was an excellent warrior, special by human standards. He was sorry to kill him, because he deserves to be treated with respect after his death. He asked the scorpion to distribute his meat to their relatives so that they could eat, and this would be a tribute to him. The girl agreed with him and started laughing as she approached Kin, but immediately discovered that he was alive and was very surprised. The tiger also turned around and was surprised. The girl considered that Kin is not a man, but rather a beast of the wasteland. The protagonist began to transform and he asked what it was. They no longer want to see him in their ranks. The tiger was surprised when he heard the wasteland beast did not understand why he was allowed to leave his post. Kin stood up and knocked out the scorpion with one blow, and he replied that he had gone AWOL and they didn't care about it. Tiger realized that Kin was a wasteland beast that had been recruited by humans. He understood that he needed to report to the Empress as soon as possible, because the wasteland beasts and humans would form a military alliance, then their position would deteriorate dramatically. He began to create a portal and, leaving, said goodbye to Kin, because Oin will meet again. The protagonist grinned and jumped right over the tiger, which surprised him very much. The protagonist asked him if he wanted to escape, to which the tiger replied that he did not want to waste time trying to finish him off, but apparently, if he was not killed, he would not let him leave. The tiger summoned a huge red axe and shouted to Kin to get it. He rushed straight at him and Kin also ran forward. They both faced blows. After a moment, it turned out that Kin had beaten off his axe with his bare hands and it cracked, from which the tiger was confused. Then they both jumped away from each other. Tiger was shocked that Kin was able to smash the battle axe presented by the Empress with one blow. Then the tiger looked up and was even more surprised. After all, there was already Kin above him, who was preparing to attack him. The protagonist said that the general underestimated him, and in war conditions such mistakes are unforgivable. He punched the tiger so hard that it flew into the wall. But then he was surprised, because a huge strong shockwave swept in front of him. Kinyi managed to block the attack, but literally flew away from a strong blow. Someone with a tail started coming out of the smoke. It was a modified white tiger, cursing the wasteland beast. Kin noticed that the peak of the destroying realm was a serious force. The general rushed at him with all his might. They both hit their hands and began to inflict a series of attacks on each other. After a while, the protagonist's armor began to burst, from which he was very surprised. The tiger continued to add the tempo of the blows, and they hit each other with all their strength, so that there was a huge flash and an explosive wave. Kin flew into the wall, and blood dripped from him. Kin was badly beaten, but he said that the tiger general's death hour had come. The monster stood up and told him not to write him off ahead of time. If that was all he was capable of, he wouldn't have reached the rank of general. A huge fire mark appeared on his forehead. He got on his knee and seemed to transform again. His wounds disappeared, and he added that he hadn't even used his Born Tiger Rage skill yet, which makes him 3 times stronger for a short time. Without this skill, Kin's fighting power is comparable to his, but not anymore. He immediately appeared next to Kin, which surprised him. He believed that Kin was no longer his rival and punched him in the stomach, so that he even spat out blood. After he bit him on the shoulder, Kin knew that it was impossible to delay and hit the tiger with his forehead on the nose, and he flew off a couple of meters. Kin immediately unleashed force into his fist and released a lot of energy into the tiger, but he was able to dodge the attack. He used the body binding technique, and a huge avatar of a white tiger appeared around him. He tied Kin up so that he couldn't even move. He understood that this reception would cause him trouble. The tiger began to run at Kin, and when he was already near him, he shouted that this bastard from the desert lands should die. Then the Phoenix Seal was activated, which immediately appeared over Kin, and all stiffness disappeared. The tiger did not understand what it was and immediately received a blow from Kin, from which he flew far ahead. The tiger already thought that the boy would not get out, but once he asked the Empress to give him her strength. Immediately, the silhouette of his Empress appeared around him, who endowed him with a mysterious power. Tiger noticed that the next blow would decide the outcome of the fight. Kin summoned the spear and replied that he was satisfied with it. There was the power of 4 desert animals inside the spear at once. The tiger flew up and created a huge orange ball, a sphere that developed to an incredible size. Kin prepared to attack, and the tiger used fire condensations. And the protagonist of the 4th thunderstorm, Kobe the Curse of Hell, Kin launched his strike right through the sphere. The earth even began to break under the protagonist, and the tiger shouted for him to die. He let a sphere into him, and the earth was destroyed even more. The tiger was glad that he finally overcame him. He began to laugh a lot, but the protagonist noted that it was too early for him to rejoice. Tiger was surprised that the hero was still alive. Immediately, Kin pierced his body with a spear, and they literally drove into the ground. Afterwards, Kin stood over his defeated enemies and pulled out his spear. Tiger realized that he had lost. There was a huge fire around them, and Kin noticed that killing a werewolf at the peak of the destroying kingdom turned out to be a very tedious task. He immediately fell to the ground from overwork. A couple of days later, Kin woke up in the same place. A bright light shone on him, and when he got up, he thought that he had slept for about 3 days. He was glad that at least he managed to kill the tiger general. At this point, the invasion of the werewolves should choke. The human race will be able to sleep peacefully. Then he summoned his ring, and immediately new clothes appeared on him. He wanted to return to the camp as soon as possible, because due to his long absence, Yitong probably does not find a place for himself. He immediately seemed to fly out of the cave. After that, he found himself in the camp, but there was no fire, as was Yitong. He thought she might have gone looking for him. Immediately, people appeared who shouted at Kin and wanted to grab him. He asked who they were. The guy shouted that Kin could not escape, because the whole forest was surrounded, and he had no choice but to surrender. Kin replied that although he did not know what their claims against him were, he always had a choice. The guy shouted that Kin was now with the werewolves and he had betrayed the human race, and therefore they wanted to capture this bastard. Immediately, the guys ran at him, and Kin used the dragon Yazi, who roared at the top of his voice, and the ground cracked under Kin. The dragon shouted at all the warriors, and they just flew away and lost consciousness. Kin exhaled and asked everyone to just explain what had happened, but it was as if they weren't listening to him and were still trying to grab him. Kin summoned the spear and was already serious. He swung the weapons and they flew away from them again. Bai appeared and said that Kin had disappointed him. He landed on the ground and added that he considered him a decent person and accepted him as a brother, but he did not expect this from him. He didn't understand how he could betray the human race and form an alliance with the werewolves. He understood why only Kin knew about the werewolf invasion. He put on this whole show to lead them by the nose. He thought that Kin wanted them to act on his orders, but he was glad that his plot had been discovered. He asked Kin to give up and ask for forgiveness and repent. Then he promised that no one would desecrate his corpse. Kin laughed, because he accused him of colluding with werewolves. Bai was surprised that Qin denied everything even in the face of iron evidence. At such a young age, he has a sacred fire of the 9th rank and is already at the stage of the destroying realm. The loot found in the desert lands is just an excuse. Bai figured that everything Qin has, he will get from the werewolves. He only offered him to surrender without resistance. Qin laughed again and replied that he still hadn't heard any evidence. The protagonist assured that he had never betrayed the race of people and lived for people and would die for people. He wondered if he was acting on behalf of the Temple of the Buddha's Heart. Bai replied that not only from this temple, because influential people from the Polar Sun clan will soon arrive here. Qin heard him and immediately Yi Tong ordered him to shut up. Fu Yao, Yi Tong, and Qian Shan immediately appeared. He told Bai that Qin was not like that. She would not believe that he was a traitor. The head of the clan also trusts him completely. Qian Shan asked Bai what he was talking about, because he was clearly told, until Qin's guilt was proven, they should treat him as one of them. Therefore, she did not understand by what right he was talking to him in such a tone. Bai replied that he was talking to him like that because he was a traitor and in order to divert suspicion from the Temple of the Buddha's Heart. He believed that if they treated him well, other people might think that their head had put him up to it. He already thought that the head was in league with Qin, but Fu Yao replied that it was too much to say such nonsense. Immediately, there were others who said they thought the fish was rotting from the head. Immediately, the head of the Polar Sun clan, Pan Kao, appeared, who said that the Temple of the Buddha's Heart had made an alliance with the werewolves and laughed. Also standing next to him was the first spiritual daughter of Yan Zhoubing and Chu Lin. Han hoped that the Temple of the Buddha's Heart would be able to give an impeccable explanation of how a traitor turned out to be among them. Immediately, a huge crowd of people appeared behind them. The guys said that they believed that Qin was the main talent for the last 100 years. And he turned out to be a henchman of the werewolves. They did not believe that he was just a gifted boy with the sacred fire of the 9th rank and easily took and killed the Taoist elder. Werewolves have always paid traitors handsomely. Fu Yao turned around and told Qin that since they accepted him, she should trust him by default, but he should tell them where he had been for the past few days. Qin replied that the werewolf invasion was led by their military advisor, General Tiger. 3 days ago, he figured out his location and killed him. Also, the protagonist was badly injured, so he woke up only 3 days later. Bai started shouting, because no one would believe that Qin was able to kill the werewolf military advisor. He realized that Qin decided to deny to the end and ordered his men to bring Zhang Chuan here. The man agreed and they dragged the wounded and bound Zhen. Bai told him to tell the truth, because then he wouldn't kill him. He threw him in front of Qin and ordered him to tell everything he knew. Zhen explained that he was really a traitor. He was very guilty in front of all of them, but he also sold his soul to werewolves like Qin. The protagonist was surprised by his words and a certain guy shouted that Qin's friend had already turned him in. What would he come up with in his own defense now? They wanted to kill Qin, skin him and expose him to the scorching sun, the only way they could cool their hatred for him. Qin clenched his fists. He realized that all their moves were calculated, and that there was no way to do without a bloodbath here. Yi Tong shouted that it was a blatant lie. She knew that it was a planned provocation. She always knew that something was wrong with Bai and now she understood everything. He was a man of the Polar Sun clan and had set it all up. Bai smiled and replied that he did not take offense at her for these stupidities, as he understood that Qin had messed up her brain. He folded his hands and told the head that the evidence of Qin's guilt was presented and asked her to give her verdict. She did not know what to answer and Pan shouted that she had no right to make a verdict. He believes that the Temple of the Buddha's Heart is an engaged party. Today he will take Qin with him, and in a few days he will call together all the neighboring temples for his trial. The Temple of the Buddha's Heart should not interfere with the investigation of this case. To do this, they will have to transfer control over all their key resources to them. When their innocence is confirmed, they will return them. Chu Lin noticed that Qin had not only brought trouble on himself, but was also setting up the whole temple. Qin realized that this was Chu Lin's plan. He couldn't help but admit that everything was thought out clearly, but did they really expect to be able to capture Qin? Chu Lin didn't think that Qin would dare to even try to escape. Yan Ruobing went forward with her sword and said on behalf of the Polar Sun clan, she is giving him one last chance to surrender without resistance, otherwise they will take him crippled. The other guys were shocked, because this spiritual daughter Yan Zhoubing, he had heard that she was only 20, but she no longer had the sacred fire of the 7th rank and she was at the 3rd stage of the destroying realm. They thought that this sucker Qin couldn't take one of her blows and that she would swat him like an annoying mosquito. The girl shouted at them all to shut up. Fu Yao said that Qin is part of the Temple of the Buddha's Heart, which means that first they will conduct an internal investigation. Today Qin will leave with them, but if his guilt is confirmed, they will not cover for him. Pan found her as naive as she was beautiful. If they investigate themselves, how will they be able to verify their objectivity? Even if he agrees to it, there are too many warriors here who will not be satisfied with this course of affairs. They all disagreed with her decision. Fu Yao asked what would happen if she had her own way. The head of the enemy clan replied that then they would have to fight not only with the Polar Sun clan, but with everyone present here. Qin came forward and thanked the head for standing up for her. But this battle was not hers. He wanted to sort everything out himself. He understood that if she did not renounce Qin even under such pressure, then he had done the right thing by choosing the temple of the Buddha's heart. The protagonist held out his spear towards the girl and said that if she could withstand one of his blows, she would surrender to their mercy. She laughed at his conceit. Pan began to laugh, because Qin does not think too highly of their clan, and this is his fatal mistake. Qin shouted for this old dog to close his mouth, because he would be next. Yan Ruobing was angry that he dared to insult the head of their clan. She decided to make him regret it very much. She immediately launched a huge fire vortex at him, but Qin easily repelled her attack. The girl got angry and used the sun at the zenith technique. Qin flew straight towards her to attack, and the girl blocked the attack. Her armor began to burst, and immediately she received an attack from Qin. The girl became very hurt and she flew forward and an explosion occurred. Pan and Chulin were shocked that she had lost from a single blow. Qin then landed on the ground, then walked up to her and pointed the spear and said that she had lost. She didn't even have time to reveal her one punch, as she had already lost. Pan believed that his damned werewolves had trained him so. As he had heard, in a fight with a Taoist elder, he fought at full strength, and that was quite recently. Chulin only thought that Yan Zhobing lost the fight as soon as it started. Kai and Shan was surprised with Qin's strength, and Yitong started shouting that the guy was doing well. Also, the head of Fu Yao wondered how strong Qin really is. Qin then pointed the spear at Pan and Chulin, and using the dragon Yazi said he was standing in front of them and asked if they had the guts to grab him. The warriors were frightened by his aura and began to move back. Chulin said that Qin is a traitor who already defies the human race without hesitation. They will not tolerate this. He wanted everyone to pile on him at once, and then they would compose songs about this day. Everyone cheered up and immediately rushed at Qin, who was preparing to give battle at full speed. Chulin believed that no matter how strong Qin was, he was still a person who was made of flesh and bones. Pan was also curious to see how long he could hold out against the angry crowd. But Qin just raised his spear and part of the crowd just flew away. Then others tried to attack him from the side and Qin began to twist the spear around him. That people just flew in different directions. Then the people from above tried to attack him with different abilities, but Qin summoned Yazi, who just threw all the people from above with one blow. Qin then used the thunder spear and struck the ground. Pan even had to cover himself with his hand. And after the haze, he saw that Qin was just standing on the crowd of the defeated crowd. He asked if that was all they were capable of. The other guys saw this and realized that Qin was not a man, but a demon in the flesh, and therefore ran away. Pan had never met a man who put a crowd of soldiers to flight. But he hasn't even used his spiritual power yet, as long as he relies only on physical strength and combat skills. The old man shouted that Qin had committed enough crimes against the human race, and he forced him to take over for him himself. Fu Yao was surprised and wanted to intervene, but Qin told her again that this was not her battle and he would sort it out himself. The girl looked at him surprised, but resigned. The guys shouted that Qin's tricks could scare stupid soldiers, but when he challenges the temple of the Polar Sun, only a few moments remain before his death. He will pay for his betrayal with death. The head of their temple decided to take him personally, which means he is already a corpse. Qin only laughed and saw an angry Pan. He shouted that Qin finally died. Then the sky turned completely red and some rain began to fall. Qin and Pan were incredibly surprised. The dragon Yazi immediately appeared, who advised Qin to run away, from which Qin was still at a loss. After a certain sphere descended from the sky, other people were also surprised, because they had never seen anything like it. Immediately, some tentacles dug into them, which literally sucked the life and energy out of them. A silhouette appeared from this sphere and Qin prepared for battle. A malicious smile appeared. They show us a certain demoness who thought it was very crowded here. Pan called this beauty a vile creature, and the fact that there is no place for werewolves here, and did not understand how she dared to come here. Immediately she appeared behind him and approaching him noted that he was too ugly, and she did not like such, so he would die among the first. She raised her hand and just destroyed it into molecules. And from the shockwave people fell to their knees. Everyone literally couldn't move, and Fu Yao didn't understand who she was. Qin realized that this was the commander of the werewolf army and did not understand why she came here. Then she turned her attention to Qin. She felt that a familiar smell was coming from him and assumed that he had killed the tiger general. The protagonist realized that she was a servant of the Queen of the Night from the underworld, a blood-sucking bat. She was able to immobilize him with just a glance. Judging by her cultivation, she had already reached the first stage of the fusion realm. If he used his trump card against her, being in full subjection to her, he would not be able to take a single blow, but he would still have to take a risk. Kneeling, he summoned the dragon Yazi. The girl asked why he was silent. Ken had the courage to kill him, but now he is afraid to admit it. She likes passionate people, but right now he disappoints her. Ken told her that he was not afraid of anything. It's just that she's so ugly that he tried to hold back the urge to vomit before he opened his mouth. The demon thought that now he was just flirting to arouse even more interest in her. She couldn't wait to taste his blood. King called the werewolves. He told her that he would rather die than let a vile creature like her drink his blood. He used the force, and the ground broke around him, and the demon jumped back. Kin tried to attack her, but the girl flew up to him and touched his forehead with her finger. Kin's spear fell to the ground, and the girl opened her mouth wide and bit Kin's shoulder. She sucked on him and drank his blood. The life was literally leaving the body, and it began to shrink. Then she let go of him. Kin's body fell to the ground, and she was very pleased. The protagonist was still alive, but in a very bad condition. Yitong shouted that she knew that Kin was not a traitor. Kai Shan was very sorry for his friend, and the head of the Fu Yao clan began to laugh, because they all deserved it for their sins, and now people will get what they deserve. Bai looked at Chu Lin and he literally began to disappear, which made Bai very angry. The guys were all in shock, and the bald man understood that they were finished because they had brought this trouble on themselves. If Kin hadn't been called a traitor, he wouldn't even be here. Others believed that it was all because of Kin and he brought this punishment on them. The demon felt that none of the other people aroused her appetite, and she decided to just kill everyone. Then she flew up and created a sphere. She let her into them, and Shen began to laugh because she is able to grind an entire army. Werewolves are so strong now. He thought he made the right choice, bet on them, and was right. 3 familiar king girls were sitting on their knees and a sphere was flying at them. They were already preparing for death, and immediately this demon grimaced and began to spit blood. Then she fell to the ground and sat on her knees. Tai and Shan did not understand what had happened and why the sphere had disappeared. Jen ran to his mistress to help. Approaching her, he asked how she was. She hit him so hard that he flew up and ordered him to fuck off. Immediately, Ken stood in front of her and she asked him what he had done to her. He replied that she also liked the blood of the wasteland beast. She was shocked that he had the blood of a wasteland beast in him. Ken said that the incest of werewolves and wasteland beasts is detrimental to both sides. Having sucked so much blood out of him, all her internal organs should be on fire right now. Ken approached her and she called him a bastard. Because this is a forbidden technique, she did not know if he was afraid of the immortals, that they would punish all the beasts of the wasteland for this. Immediately, he grabbed her by the neck and Ken replied to her that he was not a wasteland beast, but a man. He doesn't care about their interspecies arrangements. She didn't understand where he got the blood of animals from then. Ken understood her question, but he is not generous enough to satisfy her curiosity. He was squeezing her throat hard and she just didn't believe that some cockroach had tricked her. But since she was going to die, she explained to him that she would take him and everyone else with her. She will use her last spiritual strength to curse them. Her punishment will ruin all the people here, and Ken should know that they will die because of him. He will live with this burden of regret for the rest of his days. A red sphere immediately appeared and Ken asked her if he thought he would feel sorry for them. He pushed the smoke away from him and added that he didn't care about them. Souls began to fly around ordinary people and they began to suffer very much. Life literally flew out of people and Ken went to Fu Yao. She said that everything that happened today was not his fault because these people were ready to tear him apart and asked him to leave faster. Kai and Shan said goodbye to him and Yitong with a smile on her face asked him to leave soon and not think about them. Ken noticed that these were just the dying curse of a weakened werewolf and did not understand why they were already going to die. Ken raised his hand and used the 9 heavens destructive fire technique. He swept through the entire arena and literally destroyed the curse. Now they can all leave together. Immediately, other people ran up to Ken and started begging him to save them, because they don't want to die. They all stood in front of him and admitted that they were wrong. They were all deceived, and since he did not betray the human race, he must save them. They didn't understand why he was procrastinating, because they were dying of pain. Ken noticed that they were all human beings and, of course, it would be more correct to stop their suffering. They did not understand why he was waiting and asked him to get rid of this curse as soon as possible. The protagonist said that they did not understand him correctly. They think that he will give them a helping hand and save them. The guys were surprised for a moment and Ken added that he would not forget their expressions for a long time, not understanding the essence of what was happening. They declared him a traitor, wanted to capture, put on trial and kill him. They wanted to sacrifice him to climb up the career ladder, and now they are waiting for him to save their lives. They don't deserve it. People asked him to save them, because he can't just watch such a crowd of people die right in front of his eyes. The protagonist laughed and said that for the sake of people, he swam through boiling water and stepped on fire, chest punched his way through thorny thorns, and they are just parasites who do not have their own opinions and are trying to profitably attach themselves to the strong. No matter how many of them died, he would not feel a drop of regret. Immediately, all the people started coughing up blood and slowly dying. Leaving, Qin added that he had originally wanted to put them out of their misery and let them die painlessly. But now he realized that they did not deserve it. He then told the head that they needed to pick up Yan Zhoubing and they could leave. And they all went ahead. Dying people said that they had managed to send news of Qin's betrayal to many sects and very soon he would join the dead. And also that even after death they would not leave him alone. After that, Qin saw Zhen lying down, who was very scared. Qin almost forgot about him and exhaled. He created a flame on his finger and fired it directly at Zhen, and literally he burned to the ground. Finally they could leave. He asked his friends if he had been too cruel to them. Kai and Shang replied that they had brought this outcome upon themselves. Although she was saddened by the thought that the warriors who had risen to war against the werewolves had fallen to such an inglorious death, Yitong shouted that she thought it served them all right. They deserved to die. The protagonist sighed again and wanted to leave, but immediately his head hurt and he fell to his knees. Kai and Shang ran to him and asked what was wrong with him. Ken realized that he had drunk too much blood, so he is feeling weak, so they need to leave soon. He said that it was time for them and gradually lost consciousness. At the same time, the desert lands. The black dragon was resting in his lair and at the same time another dragon appeared above them. He went downstairs and the girl went with her. Then she took on a human form. She told her father that she was back. He woke up and was glad that his daughter was finally home. The girl began to tremble from fear. Black felt the blood of thoroughbred werewolves in her and thanked his daughter. He gladly accepted her gift and wanted to eat her. But immediately she stopped his mouth and asked what he was up to. She brought her to him not for lunch, but so that he would purify her blood and then she could become one of them. Black did not understand what he was talking about. Immediately, all the other monsters rebelled. They all began to surround her and the girl hid behind her friend. Immediately, she frowned and shouted, so that they all dispersed and went to bed, because they scare her sister, which the monsters did. Black explained that purifying the blood of the ancients is not an easy procedure. She just returned and immediately with a headache for her father. The girl replied to him that she was not going to discuss it, she was only notifying him. She also told him another piece of news. During her journey into the world of people, she met an interesting young man. Black asked, and what is interesting about him? She replied that he had the body of a wasteland beast, and the dragon was very surprised. Immediately, the black dragon began to clear the view. All around the monsters began to run away in panic. After a moment, the black dragon took on a human form, but was covered with a special black dragon armor. He was surprised that some person had the body of a wasteland beast. The daughter replied that his name is Kinyan. He owns the sacred fire of the 9th rank. He is very young, but extremely promising. She invited him to join them, but unfortunately he refused. When they decide to leave the desert lands and move to the outside world, Kin could help them a lot. Therefore, she signed a contract with him. My father started shouting, because you can't sign contracts with the first person you meet. He grabbed her hand, because he wanted to look at the seal. Then a certain purple aura appeared and he saw the dragon Yazi. Black immediately recognized his brother and the daughter thought that her father was delusional. He replied that everything was fine. For the beast of the wasteland, a contract is a sacred thing. Once signed, it means you have to honor him. Then he pointed his finger at the girl and ordered her to follow him. The daughter asked her not to be afraid, because her father had already agreed and he would not offend her. The girl followed him, and her father roared in 3 streams. He realized that since Kin is his last support, he promises that he will take care of him as his own son. Then he wiped his tears and said that in 7 months they would have a big holiday. And by that time he and that girl would definitely be related. The girl was shocked by his words and even almost cried. After that, we are shown in the depths of the earth's core, the werewolf palace. An unknown girl was sitting on the throne, and her servants were kneeling in front of her. It was the werewolf queen. The dragon had told her that a bat was a low-ranking creature. The bloodsucker originally didn't deserve to be among them. He believed that she had wrongly appointed her one of the 4 generals. She not only failed the task, but also died at the hands of a man, and considered it a disgrace. Black Bull added that there is one promising fire bull among his subordinates. He could replace the bloodsucker at least without loss of quality. The turtle replied that he strongly doubted it, because this fiery bull is very rude and stupid. He is not equal to a bloodsucker. The queen laughed and replied that the death of her ward made all of them noticeably activate their convolution. Immediately, all the subordinates tensed up. She added that she already has her own candidate for this position, but now it is much more important to her from whose hands her faithful bloodsucker fell. She doesn't have much strength, but she was still at the first stage of the fusion realm, and the entire territory for which she was responsible. There would be no more than 7 or 8 people of comparable level, and even from such an opponent, she would be able to escape unharmed. The dragon said that perhaps a unique person had appeared among the people. This happens sometimes, and the bloodsucker has always been arrogant and did not know the measure. Apparently, that's what ruined her. The Empress remembered that that territory was called the Tian Empire. She wants the three of them to go there, find that man and try to lure him to their side, and if it doesn't work out, they have to kill him. The dragon was surprised and asked if for the sake of such a trivial task, the participation of all three would be required. He could have handled it alone. The Empress did not know what to say and frowning. Immediately all three knelt down and she said that they could be free. After a moment, they simply disappeared. That only silhouettes remained of them. Immediately, a certain fire appeared right in front of the Empress. Feng Sheng immediately began to loom right in front of her. The Empress welcomed the immortal into her home. He told her that starting today, the amount of mandatory donations for werewolves is doubling. The Empress was shocked by such instructions. Feng Sheng told her that this was not a matter for discussion, but an inescapable reality. She should know that she brought this on her own heads. From now on, they have no right to approach Qin Yu. Immediately he disappeared and the Empress was very angry and did not understand who this Qin Yu was. After that, we are shown the heavenly kingdom of the immortals. Shuan prettily swung on the swing and ate a lollipop. Feng Sheng began to descend from the sky and asked his sister if this decision was going too far. She asked him to be silent, because they dared to encroach on her betrothed, and this would be a warning to the werewolves. She thought that her kin was getting more and more delicious. Feng Sheng said that kin is too closely related to the beasts of the wasteland. It's better not to talk about him once again if rumors get to. But before he could finish, Shuan got angry, looked at Feng Sheng and replied that she already has the supreme seal, which means she will become the next ruler of all immortals, so no one will dare to spread rumors about her. The enmity between the immortals and the beasts of the wasteland has been going on for too long, and perhaps Qin will help put an end to this. If the beasts of the wasteland finally submit to them, it should definitely be a serious achievement. Feng Sheng simply exhaled instead of answering. His sister thought he was worrying too much for nothing. By the way, from today on, he will live in the mortal world and secretly guard Qin. This time he was lucky and he stayed alive. And next time he may not be lucky, so his protection will not hurt him. From this information, Feng Sheng was literally shocked that he was already petrified. After that, we are shown the secret grounds of the Temple of the Heart of the Buddha. Qin sat in the water and meditated. Fu Yao watched this picture and noticed that 10 full days had passed, and Qin Yu still did not wake up. Kai Shan immediately appeared, who greeted the mentor. She asked if Qin had come to his senses. Fu Yao replied that he needed a couple more days and asked how the investigation was progressing. Kai Shan replied that she had found out everything. Bai Fefen was a spy who had been infiltrated by the Polar Sun clan. In fact, he turned out to be their second spiritual son. Now they have returned to their temple, and Bai Fefen has taken the position of the head of the clan. Fu Yao added that they had signed their own death sentences. Kai Shang added that when they returned, they immediately began to gather forces around them. They convinced everyone that the werewolf invasion was part of their temple's conspiracy. Unfortunately, many believed them. The Polar Sun clan and the Jasper Fairy clan are now jointly preparing to go on them with a punitive expedition. Also, many smaller clans joined them. The School of the Ruthless Sword remains on the sidelines for now. Fu Yao believed that the world had been turned upside down. Evil pretends to be good. Since they go to war against them, they will give them a worthy rebuff. She told Kai Shan to summon all the mentors and the strongest students. She understood her teacher, and the head added that perhaps everything that was happening was for the best. The long-term rivalry of the 4 great temples has not revealed the strongest. It seems like it's finally going to happen. 5 days later at the spiritual spring, Qin was still sitting in the waterfall. Finally he opened his eyes. His hair stood on end. He lit up with an aura and the water around him rose. A scroll appeared, which he immediately opened and began to absorb. After that, he felt that it was not in vain that he sought to get to the source, because his body had strengthened even better than he had expected. Now bones, muscles, and joints are ready to withstand a lot, which means it's time to break through to the 5th stage of the Destroying Kingdom. A grade 9 pill and a trophy from the Tiger General's body should be enough for that. He immediately absorbed them and used the 9 Heavens destructive fire technique. All this fire was absorbed by Qin, and the water around Qin just flew away from him. Then the protagonist looked inside himself. Again, there were many different crystals. They all started flying into Qin again, and in a moment everything was ready. An incredibly huge yellow ray appeared, which could be seen from everywhere. The guy realized that he was now at the 6th stage of the Destroying Realm. He opened the scroll and realized that it was time for the 5th dragon beast, Yinglong, and poked at it. Immediately, a huge birch dragon appeared above him, which seemed to be flying straight at Qin. He wanted to devour the guy, but Qin didn't even move. Immediately, he dissolved and Qin swallowed him up. The protagonist realized that being at the 6th stage of the Destroying Realm and having the strength of 5 beasts, his current combat power is at least at the level of the 3rd stage of the Kingdom of Emptiness. His next goal is to reach the peak of the Destroying Kingdom and summon the 5th son of the dragon, the insatiable Tatot. When he has tout power, the subsequent cultivation will be rapid and abrupt. He stood up and stretched and immediately realized that there was no water around him. He began to think about how he could explain to the head the disappearance of the spiritual source. Fu Yao immediately appeared, who did not understand what was happening, but saw Qin, who had awakened. Immediately she noticed that there was no water under the Qin, and he just smiled and waved the water. She started screaming because she didn't understand what had happened to their source. After that, they were all in the main hall of the Temple of the Buddha's Heart. The head just stiffened. Yitong asked if he really had fully recovered, and Kai Shan thought he needed to rest. The head noticed that it would be better if they asked what happened to the spiritual source. Qin replied that he had fully recovered and was even stronger than before. He is also very embarrassed in front of their temple for the source. Fu Yao was glad that he realized what he had done. Qin replied that he did not do it on purpose, and he will not allow the Temple of the Buddha's Heart to be left at a loss because of his stay. He created 3 scrolls that floated in the air. He said that these were 3 scrolls with heaven-level martial techniques and asked her to accept them as compensation for the damage. Fu Yao was shocked that these scrolls were of the heavenly level. Kai Shan noticed that their spiritual source was very valuable, but not as valuable, and Yitong found Qin too kind. The head accepted them and replied that he really was behaving like a non-native. But in order to save everyone from embarrassment, she would leave them with her for now and immediately turned away, because she was embarrassed herself, and the girls looked at her. Qin thought she was cute, even at that age. Then Ling appeared, who was glad that Qin had awakened. He noticed that the hero looked better than before and Qin thanked him. He turned to the head and reported that all her subordinates were already ready to take the fight with the Polar Sun clan and the Jasper Fairy clan, but they don't know yet who else they are going to attract to their side. He was already thinking of turning to the ancient demon. Fu Yao replied that this demon has been leading the life of a recluse for decades and has not left his mount. Moreover, he is too strange a character to be considered a reliable ally. Kai Shan asked who the ancient demon was. The head replied that he was a free cultivator whose life path was unknown to anyone. 40 years ago, he came down from Yinshan Mountain. His appearance was terrifying. Even then, he was at the first stage of the realm of emptiness. She was very young, but her mentor took her with him to meet him. That day, the Yinshan demon defeated her mentor with just one blow. Moreover, the Yinshan demon challenged the other heads of the 4 great temples as well. It was also enough for him to defeat the heads of the Polar Sun clan, the Jasper Fairy clan, and the Ruthless Sword School one by one. Qin thought about it and realized that Fu Yao was already more than 50 years old. The head was shocked and said that she was only 49. After that incident, he went alone to the desert lands, although he returned from there badly wounded, but clearly not empty-handed. After his return, he challenged many temples throughout the Tian Empire and was never defeated. In the end, it was their Temple of the Heart of the Buddha who summoned his supreme ancestor, who defeated him. After that battle, the Yinshan demon went into the lock on Yinshan Mountain and did not appear again. 40 years have passed since then. Qin thought about it, because in his past life he had heard rumors about the Yinshan demon. He was described as an absolute madman. In his picture of the world there was neither good nor evil. For the sake of increasing his cultivation, he was willing to do anything. Qin assumed that the Polar Sun clan had made him a tempting offer. Len noticed that if so, then their temple would have to summon the Supreme Ancestor again. Fu Yao replied that the Supreme Ancestor also went into the lock decades ago and it would not be easy to summon him. Immediately, one of the students appeared and reported to the head that a person from the Merciless Sword School had come. She ordered him to let him into the hall and he agreed. After this warrior came in, Kai Shan recognized him and his name is Chu Han. She said that since their last meeting, she had managed to officially join the Ruthless Sword School. She greeted the head of Fu Yao and everyone present. She also noticed that she hadn't seen Qin for a long time and he nodded. Today, she came to their scar to express the position of the Ruthless Sword School. They are ready to support the Temple of the Buddha's Heart and fight with them against the Polar Sun clan and the Jasper Fairy clan. The head asked on what conditions they are ready. She replied that when it was over, they would borrow Qin Yu for a while. The protagonist was surprised and Fu Yao even decided to ask again. They want to use his sacred fire of the 9th rank for their needs. This is their only condition. The head told Qin that even though he was with them now, she had no right to make such decisions for him. It all depends on him. Qin replied that he agreed and Chu Hanny thanked him from the bottom of her heart. Then she told the head that since Qin had given his consent, it meant that from now on they were allies. They will be ready to act on her orders. Fu Yao was glad and replied that a big battle was waiting for them ahead. But having the Ruthless Sword School as allies, they were not afraid of the enemy even if he attracted the Yinshan demon to his side. The girl noticed that her task was over and she had to go back. Then she started to leave and whispered to Qin that she would be waiting for him in the city today. She needed to consult with him. Qin was surprised and did not understand what she wanted. After that, Qin walked through the night city where life was in full swing. Then he noticed Chu Hande, who was standing near the tree. She was very beautiful and approaching her, Qin asked what she wanted to consult with him about. She asked him to follow him, and the surprised Kin just scratched his head. After that, they were in the hotel on the second floor. She stood in front of the door and told him to come in. Kin was surprised and asked if she would go. Confused, Hanny replied that they were not on a date here, and assured him that he would not be harmed. Kin didn't understand who was there. Opening the door, Kin saw a beautiful woman in front of him, who was glad that he had come. Kin asked who she was. The woman clearly knew him and noticed that he looked like someone. Kin apologized to Auntie Zio for not recognizing her right away. She replied that it was okay and was glad that at least he remembered. He and her father had been friends since childhood. She was sorry that the Kin family had faced such a misfortune. After they sat down at the table, and she added that she was aware of what was happening to him. She thinks that if his father had the good fortune to watch him, he would be proud of him. Kin asked Zio not to worry about this, because he would not shame the good name of his ancestors. She was glad to hear that. She was also looking for a meeting with him to tell him something very important. Kin was surprised and asked. Auntie replied that you should not trust the school of the ruthless sword. Kin was surprised and asked again. In words, they are ready to help the Temple of the Heart of the Buddha in the war against the clans of the Polar Sun and Jasper Fairies. But in fact it is a conspiracy. The Merciless Sword School made a deal with two clans long ago. They are all bastards of the same litter. At key moments, they will betray the Temple of the Buddha's heart. Kin realized that this would indeed be in the spirit of the Ruthless Sword School. They believe that their plan is perfect, but it is not destined to come true. She summoned the ring and added that, however, he still had to be careful. Her sect of immaculate souls, though small, but they also have hidden powers. Soon, she would help him neutralize the Merciless Sword School. She handed him the ring. Among other things, there is a pill of 9 cycles of Kai rotation inside the ring. It may come in handy for him. And most importantly, there is the spirit of the spear of the god of war. Kin was surprised by this information. She does not give him the spirit of the spear of the god of war from a good life at all. But after all that the Kin family had to go through, she has no other choice. Now all hope is in him. She believes that he will be able to skillfully use this power. Kin realized that Auntie Zio had been carrying the spear spirit of the god of war all this time. In his previous life, after returning from the desert lands, he had been trying to find him for a long time. In view of the failure of his attempts, he eventually decided that with the death of his father and grandfather, the spirit of the spear was irretrievably lost. After all, by the time Aunt Zio returned from the desert lands, she had already died from the invasion of werewolves. Zio added that in such turbulent times, even decent people can show themselves from the worst side. His father was a great warrior, but died as a result of a vile conspiracy of trusted people. He should be very careful. Now inattention is an unacceptable luxury. He's the last living man in his family. He asked her not to worry, because he would be fine. Moreover, the day will come and he will return the former glory of the Kin family. Zio was glad. She admired his attitude and determination. Just about their conversation today. He should not tell anyone, and also take up the assimilation of the spirit of the spear of the god of war. At the moment of a great battle, he can serve him a great service. Then Kin stood up and folded his hands and asked her to take care of herself. She should not risk much for the sake of eliminating the Ruthless Sword School. If she feels danger, she should immediately abandon this venture. For him, her life is much more important. He summoned the ring, because he wanted the spirit of the spear of the god of war to appear, and he ordered him to appear. Immediately, a spear appeared from the ring and a huge beam appeared directly from it. Kin felt a strong will to fight and crush the enemies. No wonder it was considered one of the main treasures of our family. A huge fire whirlpool appeared, spun, and a fire demon appeared right in front of Kin. The protagonist knew that everything has a soul. Weapons are no exception. When the will of the weapon and its owner are mutually communicated, the spirit of the weapon is born. There are very few warriors capable of awakening the spirit of weapons. There are no more than 100 items of weapons with spirit on the entire continent. As a child, he only heard from his father that the spear of the god of war has a spirit. But in his previous life he never saw it. The spear spirit realized that this was a descendant of the Kin clan. He asked him what he wanted. Kin felt a strong power and the spirit asked again. The protagonist said that he is a proud son of the Kin family. His blood is boiling and he is eager to punish enemies. He is determined to fight for the good of the human race. He is determined to destroy the werewolves. He wants to protect law and order on his land. The spirit started laughing a lot and noted that it was a great speech. He took the spear and added that if he wanted it to be in his service, he had to prove that he was worthy of it. Kin knew that it would not be easy to subdue the spear of the god of war. He also took a spear and summoned the dragon Yazi. But Kin was ready for this and got into a fighting pose. Then they pushed off and both jumped straight at each other and collided with spears. They were both glad to meet in this battle. Then the hero jumped back and found it curious. He decided to summon the first thunder spear, which the spirit also did. After they both used the spirit reduction technique and they collided, that there was an incredibly big explosion. Immediately, Kin jumped back using the second thunder spear flew straight at the spirit, which surprised him. Kin was flying at supersonic speed, and then in front of him he saw the dragon Yazi, who wanted to grab the spirit. After a moment, he grabbed it and literally snapped it. Kin immediately used the third thunder spear. After that, he let him down and used the ancestor's spirit. The spirit began to literally spin and Kin was surprised. Immediately, the spirit also used Kin's technique, but he managed to dodge. Then he was right behind him. The spirit used the second spear. Kin managed to turn around and block the attack with a spear. The protagonist flew down, falling down. Afterwards, Kin stood up, and the spirit of war descended. The guy realized that he was not going to give up. The spirit replied that he was the spirit of the spear. He masters any spear technique at a glance, and if Kin thought of surpassing his skill and dexterity, he might not even try. In this he is no match for him. Kin asked him to wait with conclusions, because he was just testing the waters, and they would only start playing like adults now. Kin rushed at him, and many spears appeared in front of him. The spirit said that nothing had changed for him. The spirit repeated after him and used the same technique. Then the spears passed through each other and immediately Kin appeared, who was already near the spirit. A moment later, he punched him right in the face and he flew several meters away. He literally hit the wall. Then he stood up and the spirit noticed that Kin had deceived him. The protagonist was surprised that this was all he could say in his own defense. If he wants, they can continue. Only now he is using a technique called 10 Directions, which in its power is approaching the heavenly level. This is also a spear technique. However, he will not be able to master it in an instant. This is beyond his capabilities. The spirit laughed and agreed with him. He said that now he obeys him. From now on he will serve him faithfully, and immediately dispersed. His spirit fell back into the spear. After the spear literally appeared and Kin took it, he noticed that having the spear of the god of war along with his spirit, his capabilities were almost limitless. In a short time, the spear of the god of war can be transformed into a 9th grade divine weapon. Although the 9-Kai rotation pill is only 5th grade, it has unique characteristics. It swallowed it up and something stabbed inside Kin. The 9-Kai rotation pill mainly protects the heart. At the key moment, she is able to make it beat even after stopping. He then raised his spear and began to glow with yellow flames and noted that he was now fully prepared for the big battle. The clans of the Polar Sun and Jasper Fairies will soon be destroyed. Afterwards, we are shown the Tian Empire, the school of the steel sword. All the people were on their knees, and the old man said that he really didn't know what happened in the forest on the last day of the battle with the werewolves. Werewolves sat on thrones in front of them. The dragon said that the old man was a non-entity. The grandfather added that none of his students returned from there alive. If anyone knows what happened there, it is the people of the Polar Sun and Jasper Fairy clans. The dragon realized that if this was the case, he should pay a personal visit to the Polar Sun clan. The old man wanted them to spare them. The dragon shouted that they were a bunch of idiots that he no longer needed. He stood up and used fire on them and literally threw a fireball at them. The people were scared and were immediately burned alive. Then the dragon noticed that they had to go and they all quickly went forward. Afterwards, we are shown the Polar Sun clan, the hall of the clan head. Bai drank tea and was happy. He believed that he should be grateful to the Buddha's heart temple. Without them, he would not soon become the head of the clan. Immediately, 3 portals of different colors appeared in front of him and he realized that werewolves had appeared in front of him. The dragon asked if he was the head of the Polar Sun clan. Bai didn't understand where they got so much oppressive power from. He needed to escape before they realized anything. The bull glared at him and Bai fell to his knees. Bai already thought that he was finished. The dragon did not understand why this man was so weak. Until now he could not believe that one of the people was able to kill a bloodsucker bat. Bai told him that it was not he who did it. The dragon added that he would not understand that such a non-entity did this. But Bai was there and had to tell them everything. The head replied that in fact, he himself does not understand what happened that day, but it was Kin Yu's doing. He did it. This was the first time Bull had heard of Kin Yu. The turtle noticed that another person with fusion realm cultivation had appeared in the Tian Empire. Bai replied that Kin was only at the level of the destroying realm. They were surprised by his words and became angry. They thought that this man was joking with them. The dragon wanted to kill him and Bai shouted that he had told the absolute truth. Kin is only at the level of the destroying realm. That day, their fellow tribesmen cursed everyone, trying to kill them after she felt that she herself was dying. It seemed to catch fire and then explode. He himself has no idea what Kin Yu did to her. The turtle restrained the dragon with a stick. He noticed that judging by the expression on Bai's face, he was not lying. Bull added that not a single human being at the level of the destroying realm is capable of killing one of them, no matter what magical abilities it possesses. The dragon assumed that Kin was just a puppet and his puppeteer remained in the shadows. But whatever the case, they needed to find him and ask him. As for Bai, the dragon looked at him and Bai had already fallen to his knees and begged them to spare him. He promised to serve them until his last breath. The dragon noticed that if people have degenerated to this point by now, then their victory is very close. The turtle wanted to keep it because it might be useful. The dragon agreed with him and began to pour energy into him. His eyes changed black. Bai fell and the dragon told him that he was now serving the werewolf race, and then they decided to leave. After the werewolves left, the changed Bai began to laugh. He had a breakthrough and realized that gaining power was so easy. This made him start laughing and glow green all over. Bai didn't know what magical abilities Qin used to kill the bat, but he definitely didn't have a technique against these 3 werewolves. And once Qin is gone, the Buddha temple will not be able to resist him. He began to laugh because he was anticipating that the temple would become his. Bai shouted for everyone to come running to him. His servants immediately appeared, who, looking at the changed Bai, were surprised, but still asked what happened. He ordered them to send out his orders. Gather an army, surround the temple of the Buddha's heart, notify allies. The surprised guy agreed with him. Afterwards, we are shown the temple of the Buddha's heart where Qin stood in the training arena with a spear. Qianshan and Yitong were sweating heavily and were short of breath. Qin asked them if they were tired. Yitong didn't understand why he was so strong, as if he made a breakthrough after every fight. Qianshan understood that in this life she would not be able to keep up with his pace of development. The protagonist noted that both of them are not devoid of talent. Therefore, hard training will definitely one day lead to success. It seemed to Yitong that he was not from their generation at all, but was teaching like an old grandfather, and Qianshan agreed with her. The protagonist laughed and scratched his head. The guy immediately came running to them with an urgent message. The head of the temple calls a general meeting. Qin guessed that movements had begun from the Polar Sun clan. The guy agreed with him. Qin was happy and called them along. Afterwards, we are shown the main hall. Everyone was already there and deathly silence reigned. The head of Fu Yao was sitting on the throne and Qin appeared with the girls. The protagonist greeted the head and she realized that now everything was assembled. She said they received a message from their intelligence. The army of the Polar Sun clan has already moved towards them. In 3 days they will be here, and then the day of the final battle will come. She asked Len if his army was ready. The mentor replied that absolutely everyone was ready. They were also expecting the imminent arrival of the allied troops. This time they will definitely break off all their horns. And at the same time the clan of Yamsha ferries. A certain guy added that at the end of the war, nothing should remain from the Polar Sun clan except memories. Another guy immediately appeared, shouting that they were in trouble. He reported to the head that trouble had come. Fu Yao asked him to calm down and tell him what happened. He reported that all the churches that agreed to the union, one after another, sent letters that they were breaking the previous agreements. All the mentors were shocked. Len understood that such a rapid change in their behavior could not come out of nowhere. Obviously, there were some threats from the clans of the Polar Sun and the Jasper Fairies. The elder told the head that even if they lost all their allies, they would still fight to the end. Len agreed with him, because superior numbers do not guarantee victory. He believed that they had a chance. Fu Yao agreed with him. The Buddha Heart Temple cannot be intimidated. She believed that all of them would not let her down. And the mentors said in unison that they would not let her down. After Qin, Yitong and Qianshan went to the training arena. There were already guys standing there with spears and Qianshan was a little sad. Qin asked them not to be discouraged, because victory would be theirs. Qianshan had a feeling that Qin was hiding something from them. Qin answered her in denial. It's just that in 3 days only the Polar Sun clan will be here, and they may not wait for the Jasper Fairy clan. He immediately used his strength and jumped far forward. Qianshan and Yitong realized that he was definitely hiding something from them. The ambassador was already on the top of the mountain in the evening. 3 werewolves appeared there, who were already near the Buddha's Heart Temple. The dragon laughed, because he did not feel the presence of anyone strong here. The turtle wanted to go and find Qin and finally find out everything. Afterwards, a kind of fiery portal formed and Zhao Fengshan came out from there and asked what they were going to do. The turtle was surprised, and immediately they turned and bowed to the venerable immortal. He told them that the werewolves were not allowed to touch the Buddha's Heart Temple and ordered them to leave. The dragon was in a panic and said that with all due respect, they would like to hear an explanation. Fengshan was angry that he had to explain himself to him. He hit the dragon and he said that he had already gone too far and got angry. Fengshan immediately hit him again. The dragon stepped back and the immortal hoped that he would not have to repeat what he had said. The dragon had to agree with him. After the werewolves disappeared, Fengshan, standing on the rock, remembered his sister. 3 days later, near the Buddha's Heart Temple, Bai was riding on some kind of monster, and there was an army around him. He believed that by the end of the day the Buddha's Heart Temple would be his. He noticed that he could not sense the aura of the 3 werewolf commanders and assumed that they had not arrived yet. He immediately decided that it would be better if he himself brought them the captured Qin. Bai immediately asked why their allies were not visible. The guy replied that the Jasper Fairy clan was ambushed and they were delayed. The rest are already on their way. They will soon join their army. Evil Bai asked where the spiritual sons of their clan were. Immediately, mysterious figures formed nearby. They all greeted the head of the clan. Bai ordered them to inform the head of the Buddha's heart temple that he was giving them one day to decide on surrender. Otherwise, they will drown in the blood of their own people. Immediately someone appeared from the sky, who asked why all this trouble and asked to entrust it to him. A certain demon appeared who believed that he alone would be enough to defeat the temple of the Buddha's heart. Bai answered him that in that case they would only be grateful to him. He flew up to the temple and said that he was not thirsty for blood, but the fate of their temple was already sealed. He hoped that they would soberly assess their situation and would not send people to slaughter in vain. Immediately, everyone from the Buddha's heart temple entered the arena with the monster, looking straight at him. Fu Yao asked if they really thought that the Buddha heart temple would surrender without a fight. There are no cowards among them. The demon noticed that he had already met this girl 40 years ago. He believed that their destinies were connected. Therefore, he asked her to listen to her adult uncle and come to her senses. Moreover, given his current strength, even if they called upon their supreme mentor for help, it would not save them. Len shouted whether he came to fight or scratch with his tongue. The demon noticed that among them there are strong warriors, but at this stage none of them can resist him. He held out his spear and fired a beam at them that brought the entire clan to their knees. Lang realized that his strength was at least at the 6th stage of the Void Destruction realm. The demon laughed at them, because after the first blow they fell to their knees. Then he was surprised when he saw Qin with the Yaza dragon, who didn't even raise an eyebrow. The protagonist grinned and the demon also began to laugh. He was delighted. He was glad that a genius had appeared in their temple. He pointed a stick at him and asked what his name was. Qin replied that he was not used to communicating by looking up at someone. The demon considered him a curious fellow. The demon descended to the ground and stood in front of Qin. He gave him a portion of respect in advance. The protagonist said his name. The demon was delighted that he was able to withstand his pressure and remain standing. He noticed that the Buddha's heart temple was already doomed, and asked whether Qin wanted to come under his command. He would be offended if such talent remained unrealized. Qin wanted to find out from the ancient demon under what conditions he agreed to side with the Polar Sun clan. The demon just wanted to tell him that the Polar Sun clan promised him that after the end of this war, they would give him their most talented student, who could become a worthy continuation of his work. But since he had already met him, he doesn't need any. Then their student. If Qin asks him to be his student, they will leave here together immediately, and he asked how he liked this plan. Bai clenched his teeth in anger and insulted the ancient demon. The guy asked the head what they should do now. Bai was very angry that he could not answer anything. At this time, Demon was waiting for a response from Qin. The protagonist called for a spear and invited him to judge for himself. The demon was surprised when he saw the spear of the god of war. Qin was surprised that the demon knew him. The demon realized that this was a descendant of the Qin family from the Divine Sword Empire. He wanted to kill him and flew straight at him. Qin shouted that he might die, but definitely not at his hands. They immediately collided and began to fight with spears. The demon then hit Qin with his hand and he flew upward. Qin felt how strong he was and he was completely shocked. The demon understood that this kid was clearly only at the level of the destroying realm. The fact that he was able to withstand his blow speaks of his innate unique qualities. The demon said that since he was able to withstand his blow, he had not seen such a thing for many years. A great future could have awaited him, but unfortunately, Qin chose the wrong path. He summoned a huge monster and it tried to attack Qin. Immediately Qin called on Yazi and he simply destroyed the monster's hand. The dragon easily destroyed that monster and the demon jumped back. He didn't understand what else it was. He assumed that Qin, just like him, was able to tame the beast of the wasteland. Qin also realized that the demon also wielded the power of a wasteland beast. He told Qin that before his death, his ancestors set him on the right path. He remembered how his grandfather Qin Heng also returned from the great wasteland stronger. But this did not save him from death and he laughed a lot. Qin and the demon were ready to kill each other, and while watching this fight, Fu Yao realized that the ancient demon knew less about Qin than he thought. The protagonist got angry and rushed straight at the demon with the words that he should not even think about pronouncing the names of his ancestors, for which he will answer. The demon asked what he would prepare for him and released some violet gas at him. They both collided with blows and Qin asked how he felt about it. Many arrows appeared and flew out of nowhere. Some hit the demon directly and he shouted that he was only irritating him. Qin then jumped back and he released some kind of aura at him. This energy swept throughout the arena and the Buddha's heart temple. Then a demon came out with a sword, who noticed that the Qin family had managed to bring into the world a real dragon. Qin was already sitting on the roof. He noticed that the sword technique was a heavenly level, a second-class divine weapon. He realized that the demon was ready for battle. The demon summoned the monster again and said that he allowed him to show himself purely out of curiosity. But now the games are over. Qin knew that such arrogant old men usually ended badly. The demon noticed that with such a difference in their strengths, such an outcome was simply excluded. He would like to see him sing after this blow. The monster raised his hand and shot some energy at Qin, and Qin flew straight towards him. He used the fourth thunder spear and a birch dragon appeared and hit the monster's fist. The demon told him that even if he possessed a technique of comparable strength, it would never equalize their overall strength and laughed hard. Qin continued to fight back until his clothes began to tear. The monster from the wasteland was surprised and immediately received a spear pierced the chest of the monster. In an instant, Qin awakened the demon. He did not understand how this was possible. Immediately there was a big explosion and a moment later it was all over. There was smoke everywhere. Qin jumped back, and the demon lay on the ground and coughed. He did not understand how he managed to break his second-class gun. Qin replied that there was nothing to be surprised about, because his weapon was so-so. The demon believed that this could not be and he said that he would not admit defeat. He had already lost to Qin Heng once, and now he was losing to his descendant. He didn't understand why he needed this. Should the Qin family really be the main test of his life? He extended his hand to Qin and said that you cannot escape fate and life has left his body. Qin found this strange, because the Yinshin demon had once lost to his grandfather, but his grandfather had died recently. He realized that in just a few decades, the Yinshin demon was able to develop so much. He wondered why, so many years after returning from the desert lands, he did not come to their family to take revenge. What stopped him? The demon's body disappeared. Bai clenched his fist tightly and became angry, because even the Yinshin demon could not cope with Qin Yu. One bald guy noticed that Qin was too strong and it would be better to retreat. Immediately Bai shot a green beam at him and asked who allowed him to open his mouth. Bai shouted that there was nothing wrong with Qin killing the Yinshin demon, because the current one would have dealt with him himself. He became angry and became covered in a green aura. He wanted to put an end to his winning streak and Qin realized that Bai was now under the werewolves. Bai took off and Lin laughed. Bai flew straight at him and said that he can say whatever he wants, because it will not save him. Immediately Qin intercepted him and hit him right on the ridge, causing him to spit blood. The blow was incredibly strong and he flew straight into the ground at great speed. Bai was in a lot of pain and tried to get up. Qin immediately appeared and placed his foot on his face. He knew that having contacted werewolves, Bai had completely lost his head. I couldn't even appreciate the gulf between them. Killing him is the same as squashing a bug. Bai shouted to his owners to quickly save him. Qin believed that there were werewolves nearby, and wondered why he had not sensed their presence. He believed that 4 werewolf generals were hunting him, but there was deathly silence and everyone just watched. Bai wondered why no one came to save him. Qin exhaled and simply crushed Bai like a bug. Their enemies shouted that it was all over. Qin ended the battle easier than he even expected. Fu Yao was afraid that this was not over yet. She did not see a single mentor of the Polar Sun clan here. Immediately the sun began to shine strongly and someone said that the members of the Polar Sun clan were not afraid of anything and the battle was not over yet. They knew that victory would be theirs. The sun was shining very brightly and 2 people appeared. 2 elders appeared before everyone. They wanted to let the kids frolic, but did not expect that they would be so weak. Key points from them, as usual, are not resolved. Immediately, Chu Lin began to form behind them. He was glad to see his grandfathers. These are the 2 supreme ancestors of the Lin family. Apparently, they decided to put an end to all this disgrace themselves. The old man said that he always knew that despite serious inclinations, Bai Feifan would remain an incapable dunce. Instead of engaging in self-improvement, he weaved intrigues and conspiracies from morning to night, counting on others to do all the work for him. Another said that it was their own fault that everything had come to this. What should have passed and been forgotten like a squabble between kids, in fact forced them to come down here again after so many years. According to Chu Lin, Qin Yu has the power of werewolves, but judging by his last fight with the Yinshin demon, both of them have the source of their main strength coming from the desert lands. He did not understand how such a small insect managed to survive in the desert lands and return from there with prey. Fu Yao realized that they could no longer manage on their own. She knelt down and called upon her supreme ancestor. A blue vortex immediately formed. Another old man, one of Rololen's ancestors, came out of it with lightning. He noticed that Qin was great and he thanked him for the praise. The 3 ancestors met in front of each other, and Len said that apparently today their agreement would come to an end. If his temple had not been threatened with destruction, this would not have turned into a matter of life and death, but everything turned out the way it did. The other elder agreed, because for many years they had mutually respected their agreement, but it came to an end. One of the Lin noted that they are ready to admit that part of the responsibility for the conflict lies with the Polar Sun clan. Therefore, they refuse to absorb the Buddha's heart temple and only demand that Qin Yun be handed over to them. He pointed his finger at Lan and challenged him to a one-on-one duel. If he loses, the Polar Sun clan will give up 9/10 of their property to them, and if he loses, the old man agreed to his condition. Chu Lin shouted to his grandfather that this could not be done. because the bastards must be buried today. Ken shouted back that he had said it well. He agreed that the Polar Sun clan should be destroyed today. Chu Lin was angry because Ken was interjecting everywhere without asking. He didn't understand who he was to talk about the destruction of the Polar Sun clan. Lin knew that the protagonist was much stronger than him. Most likely he is stronger than anyone in their generation, but compared to his supreme ancestors, he is simply a non-entity. Ken replied that by comparing him with himself, he did not give him a compliment, but insulted him. He, too, may ask who he is to pronounce a death sentence on him. He already realized that he has the gift of surviving even in the most seemingly hopeless situations. This is another reason to get rid of it once and for all. Then Lin's ancestor laughed and noted that Ken should not only have pride, but also the ability to realize the real state of affairs. Another noted that although Ken is talented, he cannot withstand a single blow from them. Lang told him that he was on his own, but Ken pointed his spear at them. He threw it right next to them and Ken said that this was his battle. He must destroy the Polar Sun clan with his own hands. The elder called him a yellow-faced fool. Another Lin noted that in so many years of his life, this is the first time he has met an idiot who is so stubbornly heading towards his death. Lang asked Ken not to let pride cloud his vision of reality. This task is beyond him. Ken turned and looked at the old man and asked him to just believe in him. Len was surprised, but closed his eyes and agreed with him and told him to do as he knew. He will not interfere in their battle. Fu Yao said that Ken Yu speaks of youthful stupidity and pride. This is natural. Is it really possible that the old man will really allow him to go out alone against two opponents who are significantly superior to him in strength? Len considered this a controversial statement, because for him personally it is not inferior in power. Fu Yao was surprised and asked if now was the time for jokes. Len had no reason to lie. Ken is not even inferior to him. Inside him is a real bottomless pool of power, the depth of which he is not able to appreciate. Ken jumped near his spear. He took it and told them that the two of them could start. He wanted to see what they could do. They knew that there was something fishy here. If Old Man Yelly did not stop the boy from going out against them alone, then there really was a catch here. They wanted to act according to the old scheme and looked at each other. The old man agreed with Ken, but noticed that it was too crowded for the three of them and called him to fetch them. He agreed and the three of them flew off somewhere. They landed in a random highland and they were ready to clash in battle. The old man laughed and told Ken to hold on. The two of them immediately rushed at him from both sides. Ken managed to release an aura at them and push them away. Then they landed near him. Ken then laughed and the two Lin elders used a heavenly level technique, the union of ice and fire. The red and blue dragon flew straight towards Ken and he used the fourth spear to destroy. Ken flew away from the blow, but managed to regroup and stop. Ken said their first meeting piqued his interest. The old man noticed that although Ken was only at the 5th stage of the destructive kingdom, he was still able to repel their joint attack. It is commendable, but so far they have deliberately used force at the level of only the destructive realm. They wanted to continue and they used their powers. They wanted Ken to call upon the full terror of the Void Realm's power. Ken prepared himself and a seal appeared above him and around him. They were surprised that Ken was tearing apart the space and creating an area of emptiness. Entering the Void region, Ken finds himself in a state of unreality. And for insects like him, this is equal to death. They shot a blue beam at him. The old man considered him a naive puppy. I thought that since he was lucky in the desert lands, he was now immortal. I completely lost touch with reality. They knew that no warrior had yet been born in this world who could survive their combined attacks. It was only the ancient demon who had to fall at the hands of that bastard. Immediately a silhouette appeared from the smoke and said that they hadn't chatted there yet, otherwise he also had something to say. They were very surprised and Ken immediately appeared with red eyes. He asked why they fell silent. Ken was covered in dragon armor. The old man was surprised and asked if the legends about the gifts of the desert lands were so true that he could survive their attack. Ken's fist was right next to his face, but the old man managed to create a blue wall. Ken destroyed it with one blow and simply knocked the old man out of himself. Another grandfather called the protagonist a bastard, but Ken quickly kicked him and he also flew away from him. The old men immediately realized that they could not stop him. Then Ken directed his hand at them, where there was already a certain sphere. He immediately flew up to them and, touching them, used the spear of the god of war. Behind them was a spear and the old man was using the mirror of change. Immediately these two were sucked into the mirror, which surprised Ken and they ended up in a different place. The protagonist learned that these two still have a trump card in their pocket. The old man was angry that this puppy forced them to use a divine class item, for which he would pay with his life. They placed their hands on the ground and a kind of seal formed under Ken. He realized that they were able to create an area of emptiness using the terrain features. He assumed that they had chosen this place to fight the supreme ancestor of the Buddha Heart Temple, but they didn't know who they would actually have to fight, and he knew what they were preparing. He wanted them to show him the strength of the 3rd stage of the Void Realm and asked them to give it their all. The old man was surprised that he knew everything in advance, and Qin wanted to see for himself how much power he was able to extract from himself. Qin then exhaled and summoned the Yazi dragon, the nine-tailed phoenix, the Suani lion, the ox Kuan-Yu, the winged dragon. He wanted them to awaken. Immediately they all gave him strength, and Qin changed beyond recognition. He took a step and began tearing apart the void area again. The old man considered this impossible. Qin realized that they were weaker than he thought, but this applies to all current warriors. Earlier rivals were stronger. Although it is possible that he became much stronger than all his rivals. Qin appeared in front of them in an instant, and the old men began to cry in fear. He raised his finger and said that they were lucky today because they had seen Qin use true strength. He shot a certain ray into the sky, and the old people were scared. A huge orange demon appeared above them. Qin decided to use the technique of the desert lands, the fury of the dragon tout, and immediately the demon flew straight at them. Immediately the old man became very frightened and used the mirror of change. He rushed towards them, and they managed to teleport away from the demon's flame. The dragon looked and saw that he ended up hitting. Qin noticed that was all. Although he didn't even manage to summon the tout dragon himself, even the tout dragon's fury technique was enough for an unconditional victory. Eyes of primordial chaos. He looked at the old man in his deserted eyes. The tout dragon is known for its gluttony. He even sucked the souls out of them. Looking at them, Qin was happy because they had now turned into empty scarecrows. Afterwards, he absorbed the mirror of change into the ring, and also took 2 of these elders and dragged them along with him. Afterwards, we are shown the square in front of the Buddha's heart temple. Shu Lin felt that something had gone wrong. For some reason, he had such a strong feeling that the end was approaching. He believed that his ancestors had lost, but then he realized that this was impossible. No one at the Destroying Realm stage could defeat them. However, just in case, he realized that he needed to prepare and already hidden his shadow in advance. On the other side of the square, people from the Buddha temple stood and waited. Ancestor Ling then began to laugh hard. She didn't understand how he could laugh at such a tense moment. He replied, all because the Polar Sun clan is now at their feet. Fu Yao was surprised and asked if it was true. Qin immediately appeared and threw the bodies of Lin's ancestors. The Sun clan realized that it was all over, and the Buddha temple rejoiced in its victory. Qin then looked at Chu Lin and raised his hand and shot energy at him, causing him to immediately be destroyed. He asked Qin to listen to him, but the protagonist only looked at him. Afterwards, Qin said that he had heard enough. Afterwards, he said that from now on there would be no more clan of the Polar Sun. Then he turned around and noted that they would deal with the others without him. Afterwards, Qin quickly jumped somewhere, and Fu Yao wondered who he was. Afterwards, Qin ran along the road and was told by Seal that he and Lai Qingyao managed to escape.